The real question is not whether machines think, but whether people do, said American psychologist and social thinker Skinner some decades ago. His words feel even more relevant today, as we rely more and more on machines, especially when dealing with large amounts of data. It is precisely data and its quality that we have chosen to discuss today, especially in the context of evolving nature of work within customs and the customs profession. Thank you for joining us, Albert.
Good to be here.
I have prepared a few questions to get us started. The very first one is about, of course, technology, the digital product passport, the EU data hub, and even the EU deforestation regulation related tools could be mentioned as examples of technologies that will require quality data for customs and other purposes. Could you briefly outline how the data journey will unfold once these technologies I mentioned are in place? I'm very curious, especially about where you will define the starting point and the end of the journey.
That's a good question. I think this question introduces exactly one of the major shifts that we are seeing in the customs and compliance domain. It's not just customs, it's also other compliance requirements. But I think the mental shift that is the result of all this, or the cause of all this, I should say, is that regulators in Europe, for instance, have realized that some of the problems we're addressing, doesn't matter if it's barring products from the market that were made by children, or if we're looking at the use of dangerous components or things like that, that these problems need to be resolved in the supply chain, not with the shipment that is crossing the border per se, and with the parties that are at that time involved, but problems need to be addressed much deeper in the supply chain. And this means that the regulation that is coming up, and that holds the same for ESPR and for the data hub, customs data hub, and for regulation like CBAM and the deforestation regulation, this data is to be sourced close to the origin of the goods. And the origin of the goods is not the first point of sending it, but the first point of creating the goods. So this is, I think, the development that we're seeing, and there are two elements. One is that this insight is valid in itself. It's what we try to teach our supply chain students, is to look at the chain context and try to solve problems in the supply chain. At the same time, it generates a level of complexity in a lot of these compliance requirements, which are already complex. But it creates another layer of complexity. It adds new types of data, geolocation data, or a digital product passport, which is quite a complex data framework in which product data needs to be recorded, to the mix of an already complex informational requirement that customs and border crossing goods already had. So I think we're at the beginning of this journey at the moment. We're at this insight has landed that we need to resolve these things in the supply chain. We're trying to find mechanisms where I think we can say that what is currently on the table are mechanisms that are not that ideal, are very complicated, are difficult to work with, have a lot of unintended consequences. So we're at the beginning of this journey. And I think, and as a result, a lot of companies are struggling with a lot of loose solutions for different regulatory requirements. There's a CBAM application and deforestation application and a digital product passport application, and still also a customs declaration application. I think where we need to go is to have one single sort of platform of acquiring data in the supply chain and presenting that data for whatever purpose it is required in a I don't want to say standardized or uniform way, because that's not what this will be, but that we have a data resource from which we can actually fulfill all these different requirements with simple activities, not with developing all kinds of new applications. So, but we're not there yet. I think the product passport can be a way to do this. At least it is a way of thinking about it, I think. But the implementation for a broad category of goods is still far away. It might also be complicated. I don't know. Also, the customs data hub might be an element in this. It's an element for a specific purpose, so it's not the solution for everything. But this sort of thinking of we need to collect data and process data in a more sensible way than what we are currently doing with customs makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure if that's the end game. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of developing real supply chain data management solutions that are flexible and complete enough to fulfill all these requirements, and also tie into developments on the public side and the data hub and other processing engines that will be developed by government agencies in the next, 2 decades or so.
Thank you, Albert. And I would like also to add to all this what you say, the human knowledge, because it is required. Probably the source of the data, first of all, are humans.
Yeah.
They are the thinkers who set up the machines and thinkers who put in first data into the documents and ensure its quality. And also they will be the ones who will analyze the data which will go out of that single source machines or windows.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is exactly the point, right? I think human beings are now currently in the compliance domain, are very much, let's say, paper pushers, if I'm being a bit so they are processing data into documents which are then submitted, and that's what I mean by paper pushers. What they will become is data quality managers, and I think that this transformation is something that needs to happen still, and that humans are going to be the people guarding the quality of the data, not the machines, because the human beings are there to make these evaluations and assessments, supported by machines, but there will have to be human interference to make sure that there are, let's say, checks and balances in this new way of working. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, and it's very important also in the customs profession, looking into the future. And recently, you mentioned that data management is one of the gaps in a customs professional's education. What led you to that conclusion?
Yeah, now we did some research on the professional training mechanisms that we have in the Netherlands for customs brokers. We call them declarants, customs declarants, and there's a whole building of training options in different levels available in the Netherlands for these people. And what we did was we contrasted the curricula for these trainings with the formal European competence framework for customs professionals. So there is a formal European competence framework, and what we noticed was that some of the elements in that framework that have to deal with the classic customs competences, like evaluating the value of the goods, of the shipments, the origin, the HS codes, that is covered very nicely. And some other elements which are more, let's say, professional, personal effectiveness, but also IT and data management related competences, not covered in the professional training. So based on that, we can say, okay, we find this important. I just explained why it's very important that thinking about data, being able to evaluate data, so data management in general, is an important skill and competence that customs and compliance professionals need to develop. It's not covered currently at all in the technical educational offering.
Thank you. And maybe you could explain a little bit more in detail what should be included into that data management module, and maybe why, if you could.
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, I think there's a number of different things. I think the main one, and so data management, maybe a lot of people think, okay, that's about where do you store the data and where do you put the documents, that sort of thing. That's part of it, I think. I think also a lot of companies actually already have solutions for that, but usually more or less they have data repositories or document repositories, because you need to keep those things for a number of years for audits from customs and other agencies. But data management is a bit more advanced than that, right? It's thinking about data in terms of templates and data models and data frameworks So in a more structured way, in trying to store data not in documentary form, but in data form that can much more easily be processed. So that's part of it. But I think another important part of it is about data quality management. Making sure that people are able to, because the compliance profession has a lot of people that are handed data by others, and documents, but also data in all kinds of digital formats, and then have to process this data somehow to fulfill a compliance requirement, fill in a document or fill in some declaration or something. These people are now doing this in a fairly mechanical way, but what will need to happen is there will be tooling where this filling in boxes and putting data in the right place, that will be done by machines, but we will require people to look at the quality of the data, and that is based on the origin of the data, on who is behind, who is on the other side providing the data, for what purpose, and they have to have all these sort of insights that allows them to really evaluate if the data is properly created and can be properly used for the purpose it's being used for. That is, I think, a very important part of the skill set of compliance professionals that is not really currently very explicitly addressed.
And probably in addition, how we handle those machines, how we utilize them best, and how we manage the association risks in relation to data.
Yeah, I think that's another element. That's actually a part that is not yet in the competence framework. So in that sense, it's even further away. Another element in the competence framework that is similar but not exactly the same is IT knowledge. So I think declarants are very well trained on what the custom systems look like, but that is not their own system; it's a custom system. I think what you're referring to is about what tooling do they use themselves, what software tools, but also what AI engines run on top of that, and what other kind of advanced platforms do they use to do their work. That is also an area that needs a lot more attention, both in the development, but also in developing the skills and the competences for professionals that need to work with it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Obviously, the role of customs professionals, as we are discussing, is undergoing a significant transformation. It now demands a broader knowledge base, the ability to manage ever-growing volumes of data, and all this within an increasingly complex legal environment. A colleague of mine, while recently discussing programming with the assistance of Claude, which is a tool like ChatGPT, predicted that in the future the programmer's profession may shift from traditional programming towards operating advanced tools such as Claude. And you mentioned this a little bit already in our conversation, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that. How do you see the role of customs professionals evolving in light of these changes?
Yeah, that's a good point. I really believe that a lot of these tools are going to determine the way we are working in the future. Some of these developments are almost inevitable, but I think some guidance in how to develop and what tools and what the purpose of these tools is actually really necessary and required still. What makes it complicated is if you think about this from an educational point of view, it means that we are actually loading more and more competences and skills on the shoulders of the compliance professionals. And I think that makes this a bit difficult to assess where this is going, right? So one way out would be to say, okay, we need to make better choices of what they really need to learn and what not. But still, to be able to understand how the machines do the work that they can take over from professionals, you need to still understand it yourself. So that may not be a very effective way out. Another would be that you say, okay, the professionals, the customs compliance professionals that we need to have a more, let's say, professional way of thinking about things. They need to be much better in separating important things from less important things, so that they can actually focus their thinking power on what matters instead of on details and stuff that machines can already do. So we need another type of people, maybe. That could be a solution. I don't know where this is going. I think this is the journey we're in, right? That we're trying to understand what kind of a workforce we need in this compliance domain, what kind of people we require to work with these tools, if you can actually teach them to work with the tools, or if they have to have the skills to develop the tools to be able to work with them. I think that's one of the major challenges we are currently facing. Yeah. And that holds both for businesses, by the way, for professional customs declarant processing engines, let's say, and for international shippers, but also for the government agencies on the public side. They have the same knowledge requirements, the same competency requirements. They are struggling with the same questions. How well trained do the people need to be? How highly trained do they need to be? How much balance do you need to get between, let's say, the basic customs compliance requirements and the insights on the tools and the data management and all these other kind of things? Yeah, we don't have enough time to sort of really elaborate, but I think this is one of the major challenges that I see for this domain, to really move forward on this, on how we do this.
Yeah, and Albert, you are working in the university, and this is a challenge for the university as well. So what about it, the university? How is it all what we have discussed or will be considered or reflected in the related study programs?
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question. So our contribution, I'm not saying we have the final answer, right? Our contribution is that we think that some of the modern customs professionals, customs compliance professionals, need to have a multidisciplinary skill set, and they need to be reasonably well trained in the legal domain, but also in the supply chain and in the IT domain. That's how we look at it from this in this university. So we have a course program running where we actually offer this combination of knowledge from the legal, supply chain and IT domain. That is not the final answer for everything, I think, but there is a group of people who will need this multidisciplinary way of looking at the world to be able to support others who will be more in-depth trained in the legal domain or in the logistics domain or in the IT domain, or maybe in other domains that we haven't really covered yet. So that's what we do here. It's quite, I think, a unique proposition in the sense that in the customs and compliance domain, the real in-depth knowledge is usually legal, purely legal, which is important, right? And which requires quite some advanced legal scholarship. But so we try to introduce these other domains in this field. I think that's quite powerful. But yeah, I think we will need a bit more understanding on how the world develops, right? What kind of people will eventually be running the data hub for customs in Europe, to see what kind of skill sets we are still lacking.
Yeah, and it's a very relevant discussion that we are having because technology advances fast. All the developments have a fast pace. We need to keep the pace also with the knowledge. So as a concluding note from my side, and I'm curious about your comments, I'd like to say that, in my opinion, high quality data above all depends on high quality human knowledge. And we, I mean governments, businesses, organizations, and also individuals should all reflect on whether we are doing enough to ensure such knowledge is in place and that it is future-proof. And as a summarizing sentence, I would say that cutting-edge knowledge should always be at least one step ahead of cutting-edge technology. What, Albert, would you say?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think to give you an example, we are currently with some of my students, we're working with a company who is interested in developing, not you, because you're also doing this, but another company developing some IT applications on their customs compliance business proposition. A lot of this discussion is about the relationship between mistakes in the data and how these are considered, how these result in errors in compliance. And that relationship is by no means one-on-one. You can actually, and that is where the human being comes in. So this is actually an example of that supports what you were just saying, that because this relationship is not one-on-one, not every error in the data is a compliance problem. It means that you have to have judgment in between, and that is something is very difficult to put in an AI machine, to have some sort of judgment in there to figure out which errors actually need to be addressed, but also to figure out to have a sort of a continuous perception on we need to look for other errors that we may not have identified yet, because if you have built-in errors in a process that generates thousands and thousands of compliance activities, and these activities eventually somebody on the government side identifies what actually in itself is probably a small error, a small problem, but they start looking back and see that, oh, wait a minute, but in all these thousands of declarations, and that error appears every time, then suddenly you have a big problem. And this is a typical issue that comes up in the compliance domain, where you have a lot of transactional activities that might by themselves seem small, but if they all contain the same small error, and then the problem actually becomes really large. To realize these kinds of mechanisms, this sort of mushrooming of problems, of small problems, you need human beings to be aware of that, I think. And you're going, and that is I don't even know how to identify this skill, how to what to call it. But this is, I think, the role of the humans, is to be aware in the development of a lot of this tooling that this kind of problems actually exist, and that small errors can also be problematic, but that not every error needs to be addressed, because not every error is worthwhile, sort of given the risk, the compliance risk that you're running. So this assessment of effort and compliance impact is, I think, one of the important competences that modern compliance professionals have to develop, not only while they're doing their work, but also while we're building the solutions that help them automate some of their work.
Thank you very much, Albert. That was very insightful and very relevant. And I hope we can continue the discussion in some time when we are more advanced in everything.
Definitely. Will be interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.